you've got to embrace your failures, because if you're not failing, you're not doing anything out of your comfort zone. Think about it this way. If you're just passing everything first go, this is not to take away from super talented people who pass courses or who, whatever what challenge they take on and they just get it the first time around. But generally, broadly speaking, if you're not failing, I personally think that from my point of view, I'm not really doing anything out of my comfort zone. And as such, I may not be growing. So the message is, if you're failing, try again, fail again, just fail better.
I am an actuary.
I am an actuary.
I am an actuary.
Welcome to the We Are Actuaries podcast, where you'll meet leaders who use their actuarial powers to solve a range of problems and make a real difference. I am your host, Julia Lessing, and I'm a qualified actuary based in Australia. I help actuaries develop communication and leadership skills to build great actuarial careers. So settle in, learn from the best, and be inspired. Hi everyone. Today we're talking about the next generation of actuaries. Who are they? What do they care about? And how do they plan to use their actuarial superpowers to make a difference in the world? Joining us for this discussion is one of our most recently qualified actuaries who's using data for good in social welfare, Siddhant Gandhi. Sid is a qualified actuary with the Actuaries Institute of Australia, and he's worked across general insurance pricing, actuarial consulting, and he's currently working at the Australian Government Actuary, where he's using actuarial analysis to estimate Australia's future lifetime welfare costs. Originally from India, Sid moved to Australia at age 13. He's an active, outdoorsy actuary who enjoys hiking and running and knows the importance of good mental health. Sid, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Julia.
Sid, when I read your Under the Spotlight article in Actuaries Digital, there were two things that really stood out to me. Firstly, our shared interest in using our actuarial skills to help governments make decisions that help people. And secondly, your love of the outdoors. I think there was a picture of you in a kayak that caught my attention. And as I'm also an avid hiker and stand-up paddleboarder, it just really caught my attention, and I was really curious to read on. And something else that really stood out to me when I was reading that article was that you've qualified through a time of huge change in the Australian actuarial education program. So I was really interested to read your reflections about that experience, and I'm really looking forward to having this conversation with you today. But first, Sid, how do you use your actuarial superpowers to make a difference in the world?
So I guess my actuarial superpower is that I'm good at failing. I fail well. And the difference in the world I like to make is to encourage people to embrace failures. Your failures don't define you. Don't let your failures bog you down. It's the learning from each failure that defines you. So long you're learning from your past mistakes and failures, you're improving and you're making progress, and you will reach your goal. So I guess that's my superpower, and that's a message I would like to sort of send across.
That's such a great message, Sid. That failure is such a great superpower if we can embrace it and not let it derail our plans or bog us down. And I'm sure most actuaries can relate to that concept of failure and having to overcome that. But Sid, you're recently qualified. So tell us, when did you know that you wanted to become an actuary?
At some point in high school, so quite a long time ago, I recall a conversation with my cousin when he asked me what I wanted to do for a living. I don't know how the conversation started. I think maybe I was in year 9 or something at the time, but I said that I wanted to become a CA or a chartered accountant, because accountancy had a lot of maths, and I'd only moved from India about a year or two prior to that. So, CA or chartered accountancy was pretty big in India at the time, and no one really knew about actuarial back then, at least from where I came. And that's when he told me that if I really enjoyed maths, how about I try actuarial, because that's something that's very, very heavy in mathematics, and it's got a very high level of maths as well. So that's when I made up my mind, actuarial has got a lot of maths, and I'm going to become an actuary. And since then, I've never looked back. So quite early on.
That's fantastic. I'm sure I didn't know that early on, but what a great story. You've known for quite a while that you wanted to be an actuary and why you wanted to do that. That's wonderful. Thinking about your actuarial career so far, Sid, what's the highlight of your actuarial career to date?
So I guess becoming a fellow is probably the highlight of my career because of the amount of effort and time spent to qualify. For instance, when I was at uni, I missed out on a couple of my part ones and then part twos as well. So I had to repeat my couple of part ones and part twos subjects to bump my average up because I missed my exemption at the university. And then came the part three exams, which was a complete nightmare for me because I got stuck on the general insurance exams. So I failed my general insurance subjects about 6 times in a row.
Wow.
So the fact that I persevered and pushed through despite failing so many times is something that I am quite proud of. And I already look back on as a source of inspiration for other walks of life. This was made even more special to my heart due to going through a fair bit in my personal life at the time. And that eventually that also took a hit on my mental health. So, you know what, there were a few things going on in my personal life. My mental health was down. And on the side, I was failing 6 times in a row. So because of that, the continued effort, despite the downturn in my life and my mental health at the time, is something that I really take a lot of pride in. And that's why becoming a fellow is the biggest highlight of my career.
What an extraordinary journey you've been through, Sid. I mean, getting qualified as a fellow is a huge milestone, and for many of us, that's a career highlight. But to do that while you're also going through those personal challenges and mental health issues as well, and failing 6 times, I mean, that shows so much grit and resilience as part of your character to have navigated all of that. That's astounding.
Thank you, Julia.
And I'm sorry to hear that you had those additional challenges and that mental health downturn throughout the process. I personally, I can relate to that as well. I had a similar, well, I don't know the details, but I also had a mental health downturn towards the end of my part 3 exams. It's huge. It's so much going on and so much pressure and so much stress. And it's not an easy time. But Sid, can you tell us how you dealt with that downturn? Can you share some strategies with our listeners on how to deal with that? Yeah,
thanks for asking me, Julia. Just because this is something quite close to my heart, and with the advent of, with the fact that all of these mental health issues are quite, they're on an increase in terms of their trend. It'd be nice to be able to share a few tips with the listeners so, other people can benefit. So a few things I'm going to list a few things, but sort of, categorize them into the 3 main buckets that I think, So one of them is inner dialogue. A lot of times we are with ourselves. So we've got to be easy on ourselves when we talk to ourselves, okay? And a good example is that when someone comes to us for help, our instinct is to comfort them and make them feel better. Okay, that's exactly how we've got to treat ourselves. We've got to be kind to ourselves, okay, when we talk to ourselves. And that's a very important. That inner chatter is one of the most important things when it comes to looking after yourself. So don't be harsh on yourself, however you're feeling. If anything, feel whatever your body and mind are telling you to feel. It's only when you when you allow that natural process of your body or your mind feeling whatever it wants to feel is when you really heal, right? And it takes time to heal. So you've got to be patient with yourself the same way you would be with anyone else, with your loved one, right? So you've got to love yourself in that regard too. The second one is surroundings. Surround yourself with people who love you, who bring the best out of you. I cannot emphasize on how important this is, okay? Love, care, and respect are probably the biggest healers from my point of view, okay? If someone is not treating you right, you know what? Get out of there and surround yourself with people who are treating you right and who care for you and who love you and who respect you. Third one I'm going to say is exercise, okay? And we all know this, but I guess we can get a little lazy or we can be short on time at times and we don't take time to exercise. But remaining physically active has several benefits. Not only it keeps you in a good shape, but also is incredibly helpful to de-stress yourself. Wendy Suzuki, who's a neuroscientist, I think in Stanford University, she explained in a TED Talk that an immediate effect of a single workout will increase dopamine, serotonin, and noradrenaline, which will increase your mood. Wow. It will improve your ability to shift and focus attention, lasting for at least a couple of hours. And a lot of the listeners of this podcast are going to be actuaries. So you know what? They're going to be either studying or they're going to be doing all sorts of fantastic things in in the work environment. So if you want to do those fantastic things in your work, you need high focus and attention. So the exercise is not going to just help your mental health, it will also help you in producing quality work because you're going to be quite focused for at least a couple of hours, as per Wendy's research at least. And the long-term impact of this is that exercise changes brain's physiology, anatomy, and function. Okay, and what I mean by that is the size of your prefrontal cortex, which sort of sits over here, which is a smart part of your brain, and hippocampus, they increase over time. These are the two areas of your brain that are the most susceptible to neurodegenerative diseases. So, for example, the onset of dementia or Alzheimer's disease. So by exercising now, you're helping the version of you in a few decades' time because you're not going to be experiencing a cognitive decline to the same level of to that particular level, and you would still be able to function a lot better. So to sum it up, have kind conversations with yourself, very, very important, because you're going to be on your own a lot of the times. Be around people who bring the best out of you and exercise regularly. So I think these are the three things that have been quite helpful for me.
Such great tips. Thank you, Sid. And I think that exercise one is an easy one to drop off when we get busy, particularly when we're studying for our exams and we're working and we're trying to progress at work. There's so many things that we're doing with our brains, and it can be very easy to neglect time for exercise. But you've made an excellent case for why that's important for us now and also into the future. So not just future-proofing our careers, but future-proofing our brains. I love that. Thank you for sharing some of your strategies around that. I'm sure that that's a very familiar scenario for a lot of us, but also some really practical tips. So thank you for sharing that with us. I want to talk a little bit about how you're using your actuarial superpowers in the world as a new fellow. And I know in that article I was talking about at the start of this conversation, you said that you wanted to use data to deliver actionable and valuable insights that improve people's well-being and societal outcomes. So, Sid, can you tell us why that's important to you, and how do you see actuaries doing that?
Well, it's important to me because I reckon life can be quite difficult. So, you know what? It's nice to be able to add value through anything that we do. And if we can do it through the work that we are doing, that's great, because you have to work for a 9 to 5 because you want to have a living. You want to support yourself and your family. And if you, out of your 9 to 5 job, you're also adding value to other people's lives, then well, why not? And secondly, you're always motivated to come to work because what you're doing is directly or indirectly helping individuals out, right? So, for example, I'm currently working on priority investment approach, as you mentioned at the start of the podcast. This uses actuarial analysis to inform policies and interventions that improve long-term outcomes for Australians. Other areas where actuaries can be involved include work across aged care sector. We know that Australian population is aging, so there's going to be pretty big demand in the aged care side of things. Climate change is a huge issue at the moment, and disability sector. At the Australian Government Actuary, we worked on the reinsurance pool to make property insurance more affordable and for households and small businesses. And that's another example of, doing work that is directly or indirectly helping individuals out in Australia.
Yeah. And sounds like that's win-win, because it's a win for the Australian population because they've got a government that's been better informed to help them in a whole bunch of different outcomes. But it's also a win for you because you're doing something that's meaningful for you. You're going to work and doing something that feels important to you. So what a great place to be with your career and how you're using your actuarial superpowers. I want to talk a bit about some modern actuarial techniques, because I know you studied the new data science application subject. Now, that wasn't a subject when I qualified, because I qualified under all of the old world subjects. But I wonder, Sid, if you can share with us, where do you see opportunities for actuaries using programming skills?
So data science subject was one of my favorite subjects in the entire actuarial education. The lecturer, Amanda Aitken, she was great. She was amazing. I mean, the first time, this was the first time I'd ever used Python. I got through it just fine.
Really?
And it was because of the amount of content available within this subject to support us. And also Amanda, sort of going through, I think we had about 1.5 hour long tutes each week, which were very helpful.
She's a great teacher, isn't she?
Yeah, Amanda was great.
Yeah.
So yeah, one of my favorite subjects. But there are several things where actuaries can use the programming skills, just because data science and AI are sort of everywhere at the moment. But some of the things where I've used programming include advanced predictive modeling or machine learning models, right? Just because we've got a lot more data at the moment and we've got a lot more computational power, which means that when you combine these two things, there's advanced predictive modeling techniques that are available for use. An example in insurance pricing is more granular risk rating. Secondly, is that there's a lot of text data available, right? And we can use natural language processing techniques to deal with text data and derive insights. Dealing with text data, a use case for this in insurance is when you're dealing with customer complaints data and you just want to classify complaints into categories. For example, categories could be split into the extent of dissatisfaction. Through this sentiment analysis, then you can triage customer feedback to help customer service teams respond to more disgruntled customers. Other one is I used is unsupervised learning. So this uses clustering techniques. An example is fraud case analytics in insurance or at the bank. You use unsupervised learning and you cluster the customers who exhibit similar behaviors or characteristics by choosing a set of variables in the data set. So the high risk customers then can be flagged for more closely monitored for fraud. So these three things were covered in the data science application subject. There's another thing that I want to talk about that I did in the part 2's data subject through Monash University. And I'm talking about this because I'd not done a project like that anywhere else. And it was so unique and it was quite fun. So this was image recognition, right? So I completed a mini project from Monash University on this and really enjoyed it because of how different it was. You're given images and you're meant to be converting the images, or you're meant to be actually, you have got a model which is going to look at the image and try and predict what image it is, right? Okay. And we were given images of alphabets. And in my mind, I just never knew how image recognition really worked, because I was like, images, because we deal with data, and how do you convert data into, how do you fit models through images? Yeah. So what you do is you convert those images into data because you need metadata in the form of numbers to do any type of modeling. Right. And how the data is structured is that each pixel in an image is a column, and each image in the dataset presents a separate row in a dataset. So the numbers represent the fill of the color or the shade of the color, okay? And that's how you differentiate between the colors. And once you've structured the coloring of images into a dataset, you can do all sorts of predictive modeling on this. For example, in my case, you could classify the images in a particular alphabet based on the data it's been trained on. Wow. So these are a few things that I've actually applied my programming skills on, but there are many other things. I haven't even spoken about the generative AIs or the large language models like ChatGPT. So there are many, many things that actuaries can use programming skills these days. Yeah, wow. Thanks for sharing your description about image recognition. I mean, I think as actuaries, or especially old actuaries like me, we think about our work as, when we think about data, we think about numbers or, flat files of policyholder data, but thinking about pictures and being able to use text, those are the sorts of things that for so long we've had to have a human looking through and reading through customer complaints or looking at pictures. But to be able to train models to be able to do that for us so much faster, there's so much power behind that. It's very exciting, and so many nuances and challenges that come with that as well, and ethics as well too, which I think actuaries are well placed to navigate. So fascinating. So Sid, thank you so much for sharing how you use your actuarial superpowers around failure to make a difference in the world, and also how you've been applying your skills in the government space. Thanks for sharing with us your story about when you knew you wanted to become an actuary back in high school, and the highlight of becoming qualified, and also some strategies around supporting your good mental health throughout that process and beyond. And it's been interesting hearing that data science principles, or data science applications, was one of your favourite subjects as well. So thank you for telling us a little bit more about your career journey to date. I'm really excited to see what you do with your fellowship going forward. Sid, I've got one more question for you today before we wrap up, and it's this. What's one tip that you'd have for actuaries who are still working towards fellowship? So going back to the first question that you asked me, you've got to embrace your failures, because if you're not failing, you're not doing anything out of your comfort zone. Think about it this way. If you're just passing everything first go, this is not to take away from super talented people who pass courses or who, whatever challenge they take on and they just get it the first time around. But generally, broadly speaking. If you're not failing, I personally think that from my point of view, I'm not really doing anything out of my comfort zone. And as such, I may not be growing. So the message is if you're failing, try again, fail again, just fail better.
Fantastic. Such inspiring words of advice today. Sid, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me, Julia.
So there you have it, real life stories and practical tips from a leader using their actuarial superpowers to make a difference in the world. If you enjoyed this episode, feel free to get in touch, subscribe, leave us a review and share it with your network. You'll find details from today's interview in the show notes below and on our website www.guardianactuarial.com.au. Until next time.